Alright, Episode 7, The African Wild Dog. Now, I am very excited because I absolutely love dogs of all kinds and all shapes and sizes. And today, we are finally going to get to a more interesting carnivore. So far, we've had pretty much exclusively herbivores, unless you count the African penguin, but that's more of a pescivore, and it's not quite the same. So, what we're going to be doing for this exhibit is we are going to have a two-tier exhibit. One part's going to be higher, one part's going to be lower, but it's both going to have a viewable section from either side. I made this with the more savanna-like areas in Africa, and I am going to make a big open area up at the top so that you'd have a good look at it, at the wild dogs, and then at the bottom is going to be a bit more covered up with foliage, plus it's going to have more of the enrichment things so that you can get a better view up here, but a more interesting view down at the bottom, giving sort of incentive to do either or. Now, while I work on the exhibit fence, let's talk about the animal in question. Now, the African wild dog has a bunch of different names, but most of them are different variations of either the African wild dog, the African painted dog, or the African hunting dog. Sometimes it's changed with Cape instead of African, but for all intents and purposes, today we're just going to be calling it the African wild dog. Now, this species was first scientifically described in 1820 in Mozambique, and its scientific name is Lycaon pictus, Greek for wolf-like in lycon. If you know the term lycanthropy, that's a very notable way you can remember. And the second half, pictus, being Latin for painted. So it is quite literally the African painted dog. Now, the African painted dog has a very interesting pack mentality. To start off, they are matriarchal, which means the head female is in charge. I don't want to say the alpha female because that entire nomenclature really is inaccurate. But if I do end up calling her such, that's just kind of force of habit. What it is in reality is she is the mother of almost all the animals. The African painted dog's pack structure is actually not only matriarchal, but primarily composed of males, as opposed to a lot of other animals like the lion, where it will be male and many, many females. And that is because the female, being the leader of the pack, is usually sent off at a young age to make her own. And the rest of the pack would consist of the matriarch, her mate, and their cubs. Males usually stick around. Females are the ones that are sent off. It's actually the opposite of a lot of different animals, the majority of pack and herd animals. Now, before I get further into it, what I'm doing right now is I am making a den for them. While they are wolf-like, they aren't wolves. So, I'm not making it overly similar to like those big timber wolf sort of caves that you would think of. And I'm actually using a slight playbook of the Aardvark exhibit, and that is a very realistic type of den they would have, an old Aardvark den. Now, I'm also going to put some stone along the side to make the cliff face cut off so they don't end up jumping over and getting out, because that's an awful experience if a pack of wild dogs were to escape, and that is because they are they are the most successful hunters in Africa, with an 80% success rate on any one hunt. And that is for a few different reasons. One reason being that they are hypercarnivores. They have to be good at catching food. They need to eat primarily meat. A lot of carnivores out there will also supplement their diet with plants. However, African wild dogs need at minimum 70% of their diet to be meat. So, how is it that they are so successful? Well, there's two ways. One is something people wouldn't expect, and that is the fact that they are daytime hunters. They don't hunt at night like most other carnivores. How does that make it helpful? A lack of competition. During the night, there are lions, leopards, hyenas, ton of different predatory animals. However, during the day, the only real things that are hunting at that time, other than the African painted dog, is crocodiles, which aren't really any sort of time, it's just whenever something walks toward the water. So there isn't too much to worry about. Another reason is they are pursuit hunters, which means they will run to the ends of the earth to catch their prey. They are able to outrun, not by speed, but through distance, to catch their prey. So let's talk about the exhibit right now. So I'm going to shorten the grass. I do know that they will want more tall grass, but we're going to keep it short to help with making it more aesthetically pleasing with the sand, dirt, and the foliage we are going to add. Now, there's a few little details about the exhibit I want to get into. As you notice, this is a shorter video, so I kind of have to run through some of the information I have. So, one of the things you can do is, as we all know, stick trees on the outside of an exhibit to give it more life comparatively, and then you can sink it down so that it can look more like a bush or brush, so that you don't need to have a full-on tree and you don't need to use thousands of those little ferns or whatever you choose to make a more lively grass or bush locations. Now, what I'm adding here, I'm attempting to make something similar to a plant that is very abundant in Africa, yet isn't actually in the game itself. And that is to make it seem like the African foxthorn, which is about a 5-meter tall, thorny plant that pretty much is not only abundant, but very useful in the term of African wildlife. They're so good at deterring predators, they were used almost as early barbed wire fences by the locals of any given area that would have those plants. Now, I also add it because it has a very dry look to it, rather than the brighter green bushes that I've made over by the water source. Now, while it got its scientific name in the 1800s, the first description to the, let's say, the European world, because that's most likely where all the taxonomy indexes come from, was in the 3rd century in Ethiopia. And we know that they were much bigger in cultural terms long before that, because they were actually revered in prehistoric Egypt. And for the San people, not San, S-A-N, San people of Southern Africa. And when I say Southern Africa, I don't just mean South Africa. I mean an extensive range that expands from Zambia all the way to the tip of South Africa. So it goes to show that they are very, very beloved in a lot of African culture. Now, when it comes to the pack itself, we've talked a little bit about it, but it's also important to note that they are extremely close bonds, to the point where it is very, very rare to ever see an African painted dog by itself. they are almost never by themselves. The only exception is when the females go out to make a new pack, and that usually doesn't take that long. Let's jump back to the exhibit. I put a larger one-way glass window up at the top area. That way it will be both viewable and it won't stress out the actual animal. Put one down on the bottom end looking in toward the water, because that's the best way to see any animal, is if you want to find animals, you look for the water. Now, a little bit of anatomical information about the African painted dog, and let's talk about its most key features. First, its coat. Its coat, or fur pattern, is very different depending on which dog you see. That's one of the ways that scientists will actually identify one from another. Now, usually it's a bit too sporadic for it to be that easy, so they do still have the tags and clips and all the other fancy things that you see. But on top of that, they also have those big satellite dish-like ears. And those, not only are they good for listening out for prey and predator, they are very useful at mitigating heat. They use them to release heat so that they can keep pursuing their prey. Because most animals, just like dogs, can't sweat. They only can pant to cool down. So having those big ears really helps. And as you can see, we have already finished up. So let me jump into one last tad bit of information. And that is why they're endangered. They're on the endangered species list for one big reason, and that is habitat loss. If you look at the map of where African painted dogs live, it looks like a shotgun spread. There are little dots all over the place, and that has continued to get worse over the years. Unfortunately, there's not a lot to do. In this instance, it's not habitat loss like deforestation, it's just people live there. It separates entire communities, and they kind of can't have these massive swaths of painted dogs. They're kind of stuck as it is. But don't worry if you just want to see a massive group of them in your zoo. They actually enjoy numbers from 2 to 24 in a pack. So they are by no means completely isolated. Now, I hope you appreciated the video. If you have any other interesting facts, feel free to comment them down below. If I've made any mistakes, comment down below. I hope to continue making at least one video a week that has to do going down the list of Planet Zoo's animals and explaining them and making an exhibit for them. And I also hope to start working on other interesting things like food, home ec, and just some little things to help you guys get through your lives. If you enjoy this, like it, subscribe, and I will see you guys next week with the Aldabra tortoise.